TV. The world is thinking.
I'm going to introduce the panel briefly, and I'm going to start first with a panelist from Iceland who managed to fly here because she was, I guess, going in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction, or the left direction anyway, and did manage to get here. And I was going to try to pronounce her name, but I'm going to let her pronounce it correctly.
All right, Birgitta Jónsdóttir. You can all
See.
go.
That's what I said. And she is a member of Parliament, and my understanding is she's going to be talking in a minute, as are each of the panelists, briefly about why they're here and what's new. And my understanding is they're going to build a new home for all of us so that we can't be hounded any longer and don't have to look over our shoulders. Julian Assange, if that's correct, right? You gave me the Chinese pronunciation before, right?
But now it's Assange.
Okay. And he's from WikiLeaks, and there is a face to WikiLeaks, which I'm glad to see, because I've never seen it before. Gavin MacFadyen, who's, are you still an American citizen? Barely, right. Who's been in London longer than I can remember, and who runs the new Center for Investigative Journalism at City University in London, where he is also on the faculty, and where they have now established a Bureau of Investigative Reporting that he'll be talking about. Then we have John Weber, who is from the Bay Citizen, is the executive editor, previously involved in online journalism and the industry standard, and he will be talking about their new launch coming up at the end of May. And then everyone I think here knows Chuck Lewis, who I usually smile and introduce in my style as my former associate producer. Briefly, that'll tell you how old I am, who's now the only person I know who every couple of years comes up with a new investigative reporting model, and he's got a new one at American University that I believe he's going to be talking about. So we're going to go back through the panel and have each person talk for about 3 to 5 minutes briefly about what they're up to. Then I'm going to ask them a couple of questions and then open it up to the floor. I'm going to introduce you again, but I still can't pronounce your name.
Birgitta.
Birgitta. Okay. Well, before she starts, it was her birthday yesterday. Since she arrived. Okay. I won't subject you to my singing. Okay.
Thank you.
Why are you here? And actually, how'd you get here?
I went on a boat. No, actually, fortunately, the Icelandic airport is open to fly to the States, but not to Europe.
So you can go west, but you can't go east.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
So the reason why I'm here is that early this year, me and a group of people, including WikiLeaks, started to work on a proposal for the Icelandic Parliament, tasking the Icelandic government to create sort of the reverse ideology of tax haven, where they pick good legislation from around the world to create secrecy. We want to pick the best possible legislation from around the world to create transparency and ensure such basic fundamental human rights as the freedom of information, freedom of expression and speech. And some, and in particular the journalists, have seen this as a free press haven or a haven for journalism, which it could be if we manage to get all the law passed. It's very complicated, and we put tremendous effort into going through all the best legislation from around the world, including, we will include the First Amendment, of course, from here, and also the legislation battling liable tourism, which is a huge problem. However, we went through all different aspects, including ensuring safety of sources, so journalists would not have to give up give to the government or other formal bodies information about their sources, with strong whistleblower protection and encouragement to do whistleblowing. We are basically taking, and the reason why we call it the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative is that we found out that no country in the world has actually modernized to the new reality we live in legislation about the press and the internet. So one of the things that I realized during the financial meltdown in Iceland, I don't know if all of you are aware of the extreme situation we're in there now, is because of the free flow of economy on a global scale, we ended up being in the situation we're in because they were abusing legislation from other countries in order to do whatever they did, bringing Iceland from being the most developed country in the world into a developed country when it comes to paying only interest to foreign countries in foreign currency. Anyway, so when I heard this idea, originally the idea about IMI was introduced by Julian Assange and Daniel Smith at a conference in Iceland in December last year, where I was also speaking. Coming from the background of being an activist, journalist, and writer, and a pioneer on the internet, I immediately understood the importance of this. And during the research, I realized that we are in a much worse state when it comes to these matters in our world, and in particularly in the UK. So being somebody that understands the importance of freedom of speech and information, seeing how it's eroding every day it's eroding, I felt that I should go ahead and do this and put this in practice. And what happened was that I actually managed to get all the parties in Parliament to support this, including 3 out of 5 parties, party group chairs. And even the aide of the Prime Minister is supporting this. So it looks, or it is certain that we will pass this through the Parliament and task the government. How quickly it will happen, I'm not sure. It might take a year. We might not get all the laws changed. It has to go through 3 different ministries. However, the Minister of Culture is really keen on changing the huge package she is bringing forward about media reform, media legislation. And I will be meeting her when I come back home to go through all the details, what she needs to do for us. So it is quite viable that Iceland could become a free press haven, where in particular it would be useful for investigative journalism. But I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I'd rather have people ask me later if they're interested. But I encourage everybody to go to our website, immi.is, where we go through all the different legislations we want to change. We have frequently asked questions, and we have translated the proposal to English. So, and you will also find really good reporting on this from Al Jazeera.
Thank you. Julian Assange, WikiLeaks.
Okay, so
He
normally
says he has to stand up. He's like,
Yeah.
you can stand up and be in place, or
I?
you can run around, but don't go too far. You be careful. Just you might get.
Okay,
yanked.
I try not to whip this thing too hard. It's really because I'm a very simple person, and all my memory is in my spinal column. Okay, so I want to see hands up here, people who actually have any idea of what WikiLeaks is. All right. No, so that means you've actually looked at the website for something else other than this video that hit the news so intensely here in the United States. Okay, so that's not bad. So my background is of an activist and journalist and computer programmer and cryptographer, specializing in how to design cryptographic systems to protect human rights workers. And a few years ago, me and other people involved in that arena started to understand that most political reform that wouldn't have otherwise have happened anyway as part of a natural development or a natural flow of economy happened because something that was embargoed, something that was constrained or hidden from the public intentionally, was released. And if you imagine a small switch occurring, a small switch between information being withheld that would cause political reform and causing political reform, that small switch only requires a very small amount of energy. So you can achieve a big effect with a small amount of energy. And if we could scale this up, so we weren't just dealing with this on individual cases of particular journalists, then we could achieve a lot of political reform with a small amount of energy, i.e. the amount of capital we had available. So over the past few years, we have worked extremely hard to do that. And that has involved setting up systems to pull in as much repressed material as is possible. And to do that, we've designed a system, a multi-jurisdictional system, that routes material around the world in encrypted form through jurisdictions which have the best source protection laws in the world. So through Sweden and Belgium. And both of those have very strong protections, not only for our equipment that is held there, but also for, we have used these successfully in practice to attack other jurisdictions that are trying to investigate our sources. So I'll just give a very quick example of that. In South Africa last year, beginning of the year, the South African Competition Commission produced a 590-page report into cartel behaviour of South African banks. Just before they were about to release it, the South African banks strong-armed them into redacting all the important parts under the basis that some of the information that they gave, well, we decided that's confidential after all. It's sort of like a post facto off the record. And we then released the full version of that report. By the way, the redacted version got no press at all. We released the full version of that report, and they went after our sources in South Africa. They didn't identify them, but a criminal investigator was appointed at a high level of the South African government. And then we said, well, you run the risk in this investigation of violating laws in Sweden and Belgium if you're looking at any sort of communications content occurring between our source and those servers, and there's a natural assumption that if they transmit it on the internet, it would have gone that way. So be careful, because you may be criminally prosecuted. And so they dropped the investigation as a result. So that's an example of which there are a number where by carefully choosing laws in one jurisdiction, you can have an extra-jurisdictional effect. This is the reverse of libel tourism. And so that understanding is one of the things that we advised for the IMMI, to try and get these strong source protection.